Good evening. Good evening. It is always good to be in Pike County. Always. And a part of why it's always so good to see you, love, and so exciting to be here is that we get to be together. And I hope that in doing this simple act of showing up at this firehouse this day, that we're reminded of actually the great American tradition that we're participating in. I know it's just a great dinner, and Marie and Lorianne doing such a great job of serving us and our incredible bartender, so thank you for everything that you ladies are doing. But there is actually nothing more American than this. Folks getting together, neighbors, deciding who the heck we want to be, what we want our neighbors or neighborhoods to look like, what we want our communities to value and prioritize, and what we want folks who raise their hand and take a sacred oath to represent us, what we want them to actually do. And unfortunately, I don't have to tell you, we are living in an age right now where every day you don't open the newspaper and hear how folks in DC or in Harrisburg are making your life better. Every single day we have folks who are committed really to a really cynical strategy that certainly plays out here in Pennsylvania. In lieu of trying to actually solve your problems, they want us to hate each other. That is a huge part of the reason that I spend a lot of time, not in Philadelphia, but in the most rural and remote parts of Pennsylvania and all across our country. It's a part of the reason it's important for us to get together in this American tradition, looking each other in the eyes, and being reminded that every single one of us gets home, sit down, and you get to be surrounded by the people who you love best in the world. And you're asking a simple question about how is my life and how is their life, my kids, my grandkids, my nieces, my nephews, my cousins, how is their life going to be? That's the job of politics, not all this other nonsense and noise. Not about politicians using the office to fill their pockets and fly around on helicopters with your damn money. It is about using government, this collective, messy experiment in self-governance, to actually make our lives better. And I start there because I think in this moment where so much is happening, every single day, there's a different headline, a different whatever. It is critical to do as the Super Bowl winning Philadelphia Eagles. I just want to say, as our coach and as our quarterback often says, it is important that we keep the main thing the main thing. And yes, I am proud to be here surrounded by a bunch of Democrats, but I make this point constantly, and it's important that you hear it. And it shocks folks that a black kid from North Philly with locks is going to say what I'm about to say to you. But I am not a Democrat because I hate Republicans. Hear me on this. I am not a Democrat because I hate Republicans. When I got registered to vote the first time, there was somebody from the Obama campaign or the Hillary campaign shoved a clipboard in my face that brought in Cecil B. Moore, now in my legislative district. And the only thing I knew about the guy in the White House is that he had a little cameo in Home Alone 2, okay? That's all I knew about him. But what I did know is that there were folks who got together in rooms like this. Democrats who believed what I started out by saying, that the job of government is to make life better for folks. And I saw them do things that even in a life where I grew up in a working poor family, where things were a little tough, I could see the fingerprints of Democrats who had no clue I was going to be born, but were committed to making things a little bit easier. I didn't have everything I wanted or needed, but I promise you we didn't go hungry a day because of this little program called SNAP that Democrats fought for and made a reality. We did that. When I got sick, I had health care because of a little program called CHIP that you may have heard of that Democrats fought for and made a reality in this country because we have this idea that everybody ought to be able to go to the damn doctor. When my parents found themselves in between gigs, you know what? There was this program called unemployment, which Democrats fought for and made a reality in this country. And so, yes, we lost a tough election that Lord knows I wish we had won. And yes, every single day is full of nonsense and noise. But we got to get refocused on what this is about. And what this is about is making sure that there's going to be a whole list of kids. Some who look like you and pray like you and from your neighborhood. And some who don't look like you, who don't pray like you, who aren't from your neighborhood. But every single one of them deserves a fair shot and a fair chance. That is what this country has always been about. And that is what we've done when we've got together in rooms like this. And that fundamental value, that's what's really at risk. Some of you may have heard, I did a 105-mile walk from Philly to Harrisburg. And when I got, let me say this aside. When I got 83 miles in, I said, what the hell did I agree to go? But then I was also too close to quit, so I had to keep going. But a part of what was special about doing this is I would do my little Instagram lives and I would get to communities where there are not a lot of people named Malcolm Kenyatta, look like Malcolm Kenyatta, and I'd see people on Instagram and they say, are you sure it's safe to be there in that place, in that community? And we chuckle and we laugh. But the truth is, I think about all the things that you have written on this wall, and we have people who have become specialists at trying to convince us that we don't want the same stuff. Every person, no matter what county you live in, needs to get to the things you need to get to. Every single one of us, when we're sick, wants to be able to go to the doctor and fill the prescription when you leave the appointment. Every parent, no matter where they come from, wants their kid to have a full belly and to go to a good, fully funded school and not be shot in the damn classroom while they're there. And us talking about that, prioritizing that, remembering that, that is the panacea to this moment, actually. That is the panacea to this moment. And the corruption that we're hearing about, the corruption that we see on a daily basis. The President of the United States and his family have gained $10 billion in wealth since January of this year. $10 billion. But they say we don't have enough money to fund health care. They say we don't have enough to fund our schools, as Representative Probst talked about. I've heard that we don't have enough to fund transportation. And so while they are engaged in a scheme of getting us to hate each other, they are also engaged in the largest and most blatant corruption that we've seen in the history of this country, and we ought to have something to say about it. And then they have the nerve and the audacity to say that we ought not be able to talk about it, trying to come against our right to speak freely in this country without the government restricting what we can say and what we can think and where we can go and how we can congregate together. So the panacea to the anger and the vitriol and the lies and the division and the corruption is us doing what we're doing tonight. Coming together and being reminded what this is about. I love being a Democrat, but this is not about the Democrats winning. It's about all of our families being able to get ahead. And it just so happens that the Democrats are the only one who seem to give a damn. It just so happens. Because I would tell you, I would love if we had some Republicans in the Senate who were committed to passing a budget that funded education and funded mass transit and paratransit all across our Commonwealth. I would love to do it, and I promise I would vote with them to get it done. And I know that the leaders that you have heard from and the folks in our communities, we are committed to doing that. But this messy democracy that folks are trying to tear apart and are using the confusion and the chaos to stuff their pockets. The solution to it is each and every one of us getting together like we're doing, but also the solution to it is being reminded that we have a responsibility to actually do something. That this experiment in self-governance actually requires something of us. It required something of the suffragettes who had no right to vote, but who organized across this country, tied themselves to the fence of the White House, engaged in hunger strikes because they understood this nation could never be what it fully must be if over half of the population couldn't fully participate. It required something. I think a lot about 60 years ago. Some of you are young enough to remember this. Some folks got together on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And I want you to think about this for a second. I really want you to think about it. Because a lot of times what happens when we think about history, first of all, we have a guy in the White House who's trying to get rid of history, which is a tried and true strategy of would-be authoritarians and kings. They do this thing called historical revisionism. And a part of why they do that is they want you to forget what you are made of, what we are made of, what we have done as American, when the night looked dark. But there's also something that happens, even if you're not trying to revise history or erase history, where we flatten history. Because if you want to tell a long story, the best way to tell a long story is to make it about one person and you center it sort of around them. And so I told you to think about 60 years ago on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And if you ask the average person, they would tell you, oh, well, John Lewis, right? John Lewis, he said good trouble. He marched across the bridge. Civil Rights Act was passed. Voting Rights Act was passed. Thank God for John Lewis. And yes, thank God for John Lewis. But we need to be very clear. There were over 600 people on that bridge that day. Most people, their names are lost to time and to history, but the folks who showed up were homemakers. They were teachers. They were faith leaders. Folks who, by virtue of showing up that day, actually risked something. There was a very popular governor at the time who told them, you better not walk across the bridge. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. He told the state troopers to get armed in military-grade equipment to confront these peaceful protesters. Does that sound familiar to what might be happening? And I will tell you, people talk about polling and Steve Kornacki and everything at the board. The polling for civil rights at the time was not good. I want you to understand that. Because in retrospect, we act like this was all like easy to do. At the time of the march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the polling in support of civil rights in this country was 19%. Hear me on this, 19%. 34% of folks thought that the protests were making it worse. So hear me on this. Does that sound familiar to you? There are people who say, well, Democrats, if we just throw some people under the bus, things would get better. If we just stop talking about the right to choose, maybe we'd get some more folks on our side. If we stop standing up for the right for everybody to vote, maybe we'd get some more people. If we just bend the knee a little bit to this autocrat, maybe we'd be able to get some folks on our side. Does that sound a little bit familiar? That is what they were asking folks to do then. But what did those great Americans do? And I want to be crystal clear. They had no superpowers. They didn't have anything that we don't have. They did not have the ability to tell the future. They did not know that by virtue of marching across that bridge that day, that it was going to lead to a chain of events that changed this country for the better. They had no clue. All they knew for sure is that there was something worth fighting for. And in this moment, I really want to remind you that there is something worth fighting for in this moment. In the wealthiest country to ever exist, I think it is worth fighting for. No person in this country to go hungry. I think that's worth fighting for. When we have almost a $30 trillion GDP, I think it's worth fighting for. People being able to afford to go to the doctor and afford their prescriptions. I think that's worth fighting for. I think it's worth fighting for seniors who have worked their whole life to be able to retire with dignity and decency and not having to apply to be a greeter at Walmart or something in the golden years of their lives. I think that's worth fighting for. And I think it's worth fighting for a country where we don't have to spend every single day hating each other. So I say all this to say to you, it doesn't have to be this way. In the work that we're going to do, electing good people, retaining our judges on the bench, that work, that hard work, that'll put us in a position where every time you turn on the news, you don't have to get gastrointestinal upset. That will put us in a position where we have leaders who understand what this experiment in democracy is about. And it's not about them. It's not about filling their pockets. It's about making your life better. That's what it's about. That is what it's about. And I want to end with this note. Because everywhere I go, particularly as I've taken on this role as vice chair of our party, a bunch of folks asking, well, Malcolm, who's going to be the next hero? Who's going to be the person who comes and save us? Oh, who's it going to be? And I want to tell you this story. I remember for the first time, I had a chance to go to South Dakota right after I graduated high school. I know, to South Dakota. I told you I like going to rural places. I don't think I like to do. But I will tell you, being out there on the plains that summer that I was there, I did not recognize as a city kid, I had never really seen the stars. Really seen them. Really seen them. And the sky wasn't beautiful because there was one star. It was beautiful because it was lit up with stars. There are stars all across our country and across our party, and our party is bigger and better because we have a bunch of stars. Some of them are right in this room. And you're looking across the table and I'm talking about you. That is how we are going to move this country forward. My pastor would say, don't wait on your neighbor might be waiting on you. This is a moment. We don't need to wait on anybody. We just need to remember the main thing. Remember why we're doing this. Remember why we're showing up. And yes, there are good candidates. You ought to support them. But elections aren't about candidates. Elections are about you. And about what you deserve. And about what this country should mean. And about what government should do. And government should actually work for you. Work to make your life better. And we have to elect candidates who are committed to operating government in that way. Not by asking our neighbors to turn on each other, but by asking our neighbors to turn to each other so that this nation can actually be all that it is meant to be. So let's go build that nation. God bless you guys. Thank you for everything you do. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pike County. Thank you, Lisa. We love you, Lisa. We appreciate you. Thank you, everybody.